Hello, I am Peter Okwacha. Welcome to Focus on Africa, our top stories. Crisis conditions. Millions of Nigerians lack a basic standard of housing. That's according to a damning UN report. The British Supreme Court overrules the government's decision to suspend Parliament, a political catastrophe for Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Young Ugandan punters willing to bet everything they have to make ends meet. But do they really understand the odds they're up against? We find out. Also in the program, a royal boost. We visit a charity in South Africa supported by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex that provides hot meals to over 500 school children across the country. And in sports, former Nigeria coach Samson Siasia pleads for kidnapped mom 10 weeks on. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Nigeria is facing a housing crisis with conditions amongst the worst in the world. The UN's housing rapporteur, Leilani Farha, said more than two-thirds of Nigerians lacked basic amenities. She said over 20 million houses were needed. Nigeria's population is the largest in Africa and is expected to double to 400 million by 2050. An insurgency in the northeast has displaced 2 million people, causing further strain. Ms. Farha warned that corrupt money flowing into the housing sector had led to a boom in the building of luxury homes beyond the reach of the vast majority of Nigerians. Well, the BBC's Chris Ewoko joins me live now from Abuja. Chris, what exactly did the rapporteur have to say?
Well, the UN Special Rapporteur, Leilani Farha, said that the situation of Nigeria housing sector is such that the country seems ill-equipped to actually properly house its citizens. She said that some of the settlements she visited, especially some waterfront settlements in Lagos, in Port Harcourt, many of them lacked access to potable water. There were no toilets and means of rubbish disposal was not there. Many of the residents living in those settlements were exposed to health problems because of the dangers of stagnant water where bacteria breed.
And Chris, I'm aware that you, in your professional capacity, travel around the country quite often. How bad is the housing situation in Nigeria?
Well, it's really bad from what I have seen so far across the country. Remember, like we said, the population of Nigeria, already the biggest in Africa, is expected to double, as you said, to about 400 million by the middle of the century. Now, the country already lacks 22 million houses for its citizens. And of course, in the Northeast, we also know that nearly 2 million people are already displaced. Now, Nigeria's housing system has been characterized by weak land administration. We have lack of access to funds, and then, of course, absence of adequate and well-implemented policy. For example, Peter, certain percentage of my salary is being taken every month for a government housing program. This is the same with many Nigerian workers. Many people do not actually know what this money is used for, and accessing that money, even as a loan, is difficult. And then in some states in Nigeria, for instance, owning a plot of land is a very cumbersome process. And then if you turn to the mortgage banks, the mortgage are offering their customers a rate of, let's
Chris,
say,
if I may just cut in because we don't have
27%.
much time, but I need to ask this question. What has been the government's response to this damning report by the UN's rapporteur?
Well, Peter, it's been very difficult. We've been trying to get government officials all day, and it's difficult. Many of them don't even pick their calls, and those that pick their phone said, they refuse to comment. Some say they have not even read the UN report. No one seems to be willing to stick up their neck, to stick out their neck to even explain a government's housing program.
Okay, Chris Ewoko, live from Abuja. Thank you very much. Let's take a quick look now at other stories making the headlines across Africa and the rest of the world. At least 8 babies have been killed after a fire ripped through a hospital in eastern Algeria. The fire at the Bashir bin Nasser Hospital in El Oued was brought under control in the early hours of this morning. 11 babies and more than 100 women and staff members were rescued by the emergency services. A high court in Nigeria has ordered the immediate release of the political activist Omoyele Sowore, who was charged with treason after organizing street protests last month. Mr. Sowore was a presidential candidate in the last election. He angered the authorities by calling for anti-government protest under the slogan, "Revolution Now." Families who lost relatives in the fatal Boeing 737 MAX air crashes are set to receive about $145,000 each from the company. Boeing has started accepting claims which must be submitted before 2020. Lawyers for the victims' families, many of whom are pursuing the company in court, have dismissed the fund as a publicity stunt. Now, here in the United Kingdom, Parliament will resume tomorrow after the Supreme Court ruling that the British Prime Minister's decision to suspend sitting for 5 weeks was unlawful. The decision by the judges was unanimous and devastating for Prime Minister Boris Johnson. All 11 judges concluded that the government's course of action was designed to frustrate parliamentarians from carrying out their constitutional duties in the run-up to the Brexit deadline. The court's president, Lady Hale, said the effect on the fundamentals of the democracy was extreme and prorogation was now void.
Parliament has not been prorogued. This is the unanimous judgment of all 11 justices. It is for Parliament, and in particular the Speaker and the Lord Speaker, to decide what to do next. Unless there is some parliamentary rule of which we are unaware, they can take immediate steps to enable each House to meet as soon as possible. It is not clear to us that any step is needed from the Prime Minister, but if it is, the Court is pleased that his counsel have told the Court that he will take all necessary steps to comply with the terms of any declaration made by this Court.
Well, let's get an African perspective of this now. We're going live to Accra, where we can speak to legal practitioner Dr. Nana Opong. Dr. Opong, what's your reaction to the UK Supreme Court ruling?
I thought it was brilliant. I mean, the fact that it took a short period of time for the court to rule on this matter is very impressive. And what the court is saying is democracy requires rule of law. And the rule of law means that you cannot have a prime minister using what appears to be illegal motives to justify an apparent illegal act. And so I think what the court did today was to certify that nobody's above the law, including the Prime Minister of Britain. And that's the lesson for Ghanaians and Africans in particular, where we're likely to have a lot of strong men wanting to use the law to achieve their ends, which may look democratic, but appear undemocratic in effect.
Well, you mentioned African countries there and the so-called strongmen. Is this a situation that you could ever envisage to play out in Africa? I mean, indeed, we saw when something like this was going to happen in Kenya, and there was a lot of to and froing about it.
Well, the problem in Africa is if you want to get to court and do something like this, you need a lot of security and a lot of money. And you need a lot of support from the community. And usually the support, the money, and the security is not available for advocates. So I'm very pleased that Britain has set the way, and that in Britain you can have these type of decisions made by the Supreme Court and respected by the Prime Minister. So Africans have to take heed and learn lessons from this. But look, it's not easy to do so in Africa, but Britain has led the way and is a former master, and I think we all learn from it. And we hope that African leaders will pay heed and, in fact, follow the example of Britain and of the Prime Minister, who says he disagrees with it, but will respect it.
Dr. Pong, I mean, What do you make of Brexit? I mean, I interviewed a minister from an African country recently and asked him what he made of Brexit, when it vis-a-vis democracy on the continent. And he said, Peter, well, this is not a time for us to be gloating. What do you make of Brexit?
Well, I think Brexit, with respect to the British people and those who voted for Brexit, I think it's a sham. I think it is really unnecessary. In a time when we're trying to be united, to be global, to forget about borders and states, and to be one world, one planet, you come up with a story of Brexit and you say you want to be separate. Separated from what? You'll still be connected by economy, you'll be connected by the environment, be connected by geopolitics, really something that was a mistake and it ought to be reconsidered. So I'm happy that the whole thing is being delayed. I'm not British, but I can see that what happens in Britain affects Africans, affects the whole world. So I wish that people would reason, and even if there's going to be a Brexit, it should be an orderly Brexit that has the least negative consequences for the British people.
Okay, Dr. Nanapong, lawyer there from Accra, thank you very much for your time. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okwache. Still to come on the program in athletics, Ivory Coast Marie-Josée Talou has her eyes set on the 100 meters at the Doha World Championships. I'm Peter Okwache. The top stories this hour. The UN has described the state of housing in Nigeria as deplorable and a grave breach of human rights. And a political catastrophe for the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson as the Supreme Court overrules his government's decision to suspend Parliament. Now, over the past 10 years, sports betting has exploded across Africa. But are the betting companies playing a fair game? And do the young punters really understand the odds they're up against? BBC Africa Eye has been investigating the gambling industry in Uganda and has discovered that sports fans win back less than half of the money they bet.
Betting shops are everywhere in Uganda, appealing to young men, feeding on their love of football, and selling them the hope of a better life.
Money is never enough to cater for all your needs in life. So how do you do it? How do you increase the money? Maybe you try betting.
It's so worried to be without a job. When I win, I feel good. I just feel like I'm the man, I'm the guy.
But do young Ugandans really understand the odds they're up against? Collins Mahinda is a typical gambler. He has been betting on football since he was at school.
Winning ticket! I staked 2,000. Chelsea came back and won the game, which means I just won 7,500.
The gaming regulator says punters like Collins win back over 70% of the money they bet. But we analysed 2018 tax figures and found something quite different.
First of all, the government gets 18% of that money in taxes. The betting companies kept 43% for their business expenses and profits. So what does that leave for you guys, the punters? 39%. All of this at one point was your money. So now this is what it looks like between the government and the companies, and this is yourselves.
It's a huge loss.
With odds like these, no wonder people are hurting and getting angry.
I don't want this.
Angela Muyingo is a student welfare officer. She says sports betting is the main reason why students can't pay their tuition fees.
Gambling is just making money out of people, out of desperate people, I would say. Gambling is for the rich, and students are not rich.
The gambling companies say they encourage responsible betting. Despite calls for tighter regulation, the government is considering a more controversial solution.
If possible, if we think that it is feasible, even the government itself can have a company that can invest in this, and then we have better regulations and look at this sector.
But is international football also at fault? Former Arsenal and England captain Tony Adams is against betting firms sponsoring major clubs because it glamorizes gambling.
This game is massive, and it has a massive effect on kids around the globe. And the governing body of the FA needs to say, look, within 5 years, no gambling, advertising in football. There's no place for it.
And like soccer, sports betting is a game you can never really win. Facing such odds, the pressure is growing for more to be done to protect the young and most vulnerable from getting hooked. Catherine Biarahanga, BBC News.
You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. It's now time for some sports. Mimi, what have you got for us?
A lot of stories. Former Nigeria coach Samson Siasia says he's still in the dark as to the whereabouts of his abducted mother. 76-year-old Mrs. Ogere Siasia and 2 others have been held captive since they were seized in Bayelsa, southern Nigeria, 10 weeks ago. But Siasia, who is also a former Nigerian international, says the police are no closer to finding her. He is not only dealing with the abduction of his mother, but has also recently appealed against a lifetime ban for match fixing, which was put in place by FIFA. Now, on Monday, the FIFA Best Awards were held in Milan, Italy, and football fans have been taking to social media to vent out their unhappiness at the notable absence of 2 big African stars on the list, Sadio Mane and Mohamed Salah. Cameroon football legend Samuel Eto'o was vocal at the awards that he felt these 2 African players should have been nominated for Best Male Player of the Year. And today, former Nigeria international Sunday Olise wrote this on his Twitter page, how Sadio Mane and Mo Salah did not make this world best 11 practically shocked me. And still staying with the theme of Liverpool, a boost for them as Naby Keita is back and available for their English Cup tie on Wednesday against MK Dons. The Guinea international has been in full training with the team for the past week. Keita hasn't featured since the build-up of the UEFA Super Cup last month, the final that is, when he picked up a muscle strain injury. And Senegal international Sadio Mane will have a day off as he picked up a knock during their win on Sunday over Chelsea in the English Premier League. To athletics, where the World Championships begin on Friday, and one woman who will be taken to the tracks is Ivory Coast's Marie-Josée Talou, who will be competing in the 100 and 200 meters events. The 100 meters silver medalist will be focusing on that race where she knows that competition will be tough.
It will be the one who executes best, as most of the girls have similar abilities. The coach would say everything will be decided on the start line. If you are left behind on the start line, you are already done. You can try to play catch-up, so it's all about being focused, not stressing and letting it run, as we say. So that's it really, staying focused and try to really concentrate and stay in the race. This year I am focused on the 100 metres because that's what's turned out well for me. So since there are always a lot of surprises with me all the time, we will see. But I will run 100 metres and 200 metres, but I am really focused on 100 metres. So that's it.
Still with athletics, 800-meter world and Olympic champion Caster Semenya will not be in attendance to receive her 800-meter gold medal from the 2011 World Athletics Championships. It comes after Russia's Maria Savinova was disqualified for doping violations. Athletics South Africa say a delegate will collect the award on her behalf in Doha, where the championships start later this week, as she has a prior engagement. Semenya is not taking part in the championships this year because of new rules governing testosterone levels in female athletes.
We took the matter to Switzerland and the case ruled and the Swiss court also ruled. So we are a law-abiding country. We abide by the rules, we abide by the courts, we respect the courts, and if the matter is supposed to be taken forward, it will be taken forward, but the decisions of the court at this point in time stands.
Peter, that's all the sport for today.
And were you surprised that Sadio Mane and Mo Salah didn't make that FIFA first 11?
I certainly was, and like a lot of people, I was tweeting and liking comments about it. I think they both have done enough to at least have been in the World 11.
I think I was more surprised that I wasn't on it. But hey, you know. Thank you very much. Now, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex continue the royal visit in South Africa today. They stopped at the country's oldest mosque, where they met the interfaith leaders who preach religious tolerance, as well as spending time on a beach in Cape Town to learn about how surfing is helping children from violent communities cope with trauma. They also stopped at one of the many charities the royal couple supports, Lunchbox Fund. The charity provides hot meals for school children across South Africa who would otherwise go hungry. We visited a school benefiting from the charity.
Me, I love apple. Me, I love orange.
The endorsement by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex had a wonderful impact for us. It attracted $30,000 worth of donations. And those donations were earmarked to provide 150,000 meals, which will feed 750 children a hot meal at school every school day for a year.
Before Lunchbox came in, the school could not afford to give them lunch, but at the same time, the community that we come from here, most of the children are coming from disadvantaged communities. When they come in the morning, they are stressed, they are hungry.
If I ask you, do you know who the Duke and Duchess of Sussex is?
No.
Do you know who Meghan Markle is?
No.
I don't really know much about that. Prince Harry is Prince Harriet William, one of the princes in in the Buckingham Palace.
They support a lot of charitable organizations across, I think, the whole world. Specifically, they have a few in Britain and I think also in Africa. So yeah.
At the moment, we've got 15,000 children on our wait list. And those are all people that have heard through us through things like the Duke and Duchess of Sussex supporting of us. Over the next couple of years, we would like to grow the Lunchbox Fund to address every single moment of child hunger that is happening at any of the schools.
Thank you, Father.
And just before we go, another look at our top story today. The UN has warned that Nigeria is facing a housing crisis with conditions amongst the worst in the world. More than 2/3 of Nigerians are living in poor settlements with a lack of basic amenities, according to the UN's housing rapporteur, Leilani Farha. She was speaking in Abuja at the end of a 10-day visit to investigate the housing situation in the country's cities. She said over 20 million more houses were needed. Nigeria's population is the largest in Africa and is expected to double to 400 million by 2050. And insurgency in the northeast has displaced 2 million people, causing further strain. And just remember that you can catch up with me and some of the other team on social media. I'm at Okwoche. But for now, from me, Peter Okwoche, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching. See you again very soon. Goodbye.